Vaughn, since I've been on the air, it's been 11 minutes and 7 seconds. I've been hearing that there's something dramatic happening in the courtroom. Because I was wrapped by your report and Andrew's analysis, I don't know what it is. Bring us inside what's unfolding.
The courtroom was momentarily just cleared here of the gathered press as well as the jury because Judge Merchan wanted to admonish Robert Costello, the current witness brought forward by the defense team for Donald Trump. He has been limited to a very narrow scope of testimony that he has been allowed to provide, and there's been several instances where he has begun to answer a question, and then ultimately there was an objection raised by the prosecution, which was sustained by Judge Merchan. But from our team inside, they're saying that Costello at one point let out a geez, and then another time let out a sigh. And another point ordered something to be struck from the record. And this led, ultimately, Judge Merchan to order everybody out of the courtroom. And right before, as this was happening, there were some quick words that Judge Merchan directed at Costello, telling him to not roll your eyes at me. He had suggested that he was, quote, staring him down. So it sounds like Robert Costello, who was that individual who was briefly counseling Michael Cohen for a couple months in 2018 and is testifying here that Cohen had told him that he did this all independently of Donald Trump, and he never informed Donald Trump of the Stormy Daniels payment. This is now sort of a key witness here for the defense team. But with the jury in the room, clearly Judge Merchan very peeved to the point that he asked the jury and the press to leave, and they are now just only being let back in.
Okay, so I have some of this transcript that Vaughn is just reading out to our audience. Merchan says, quote, I'd like to discuss, these are from our correspondent, our program's correspondent, Lisa Ferry, in the courtroom. I'd like to discuss proper decorum in my courtroom, Merchan says. If you don't like my ruling, you don't say geez. You don't say strike it because I'm the only one who can strike it from the record. Judge Merchan, you don't give me side eye and you don't roll your eyes. Costello, I understand. Merchan, clear the courtroom. This seems like, it seems very theatrical. This seems very Trumpian. What sort of damage can it do in the eyes of the jury?
Can I just say, I have been in a situation where I have had to and gotten court permission to have a lawyer for somebody testify. Those lawyers are dispassionate and careful, and they are only going to answer questions that they legally have to answer because they have a continuing duty of loyalty to their client or sometimes former client. Mm-hmm. And you know, and I would know in that situation that they were being completely ethical and trying to adhere to their continuing duties to their client. This is the antithesis of that from what we're seeing.
And just remind everybody who Costello is.
So Costello is somebody who Michael Cohen spoke to and had an attorney-client privileged relationship but ultimately didn't hire. He has worked with Rudy Giuliani, and there has been evidence introduced, and this also came up in the Mueller investigation, suggesting that he and others were part of an effort to try to get Michael Cohen not to cooperate. It'll be interesting to see how much that plays out on cross. His behavior in the courtroom, let's just say it is not consonant with what I have seen with somebody thinking about their obligations to that client or prospective client, and isn't coming off as dispassionate.
Yeah. I mean, Suzanne Craig, you've watched all of this. I've read it all, which is a distant second to seeing it. I've not read Merchan this upset in every day of the trial transcript that I've read.
No, and I think what's really important about it is how much the jury reads him. You always see in these trials I've sat through, this is my third one, and the jury and the judge have a real relationship. And I think this is it's a big error on Trump's team's part to have this sort of exchange happening in the courtroom. They really pick up on what the judge is thinking, and I think it works against whoever's doing this, which happens to be Trump in this instance.
It's so ironic that everybody was saying, oh, Michael's going to, be glib or bust or unravel. Exactly. 25 hours on the stand, nothing. This guy's on the stand for a half hour. So that tells you something. And Andrew, obviously, you know this infinitely better than any of us. That has to play on a jury. You know, when
Yeah.
you see a judge behaving that way, it destroys the credibility of that witness. I mean, it's just, he might as well say, don't believe this guy.
And they've got some smart jurors on there, including, I mean, not the, but 2 lawyers too, who, you know, have seen this sort of thing before. They've been in courtrooms, I'm sure. You know, they're going to be reading this.
I mean, judges like jurors. I mean, and
Yeah.
judges like
Like
judges.
judges,
Right.
I mean, judges
They
are
need each
protective
other.
of-
That's the
They're like,
symbiosis.
exactly.
Yeah,
And they're
yeah,
advocates.
yeah.
Disrespecting a judge as a witness, it's just not a good thing, and especially because it's going to feed the reason it's not helpful to Trump's team right now is that's going to feed into the cross about alliance.
Again, I speak I have no expertise except getting picked twice. You're sitting there as a juror, and I know there are technical aspects to bank fraud, and there are 19 checks, but you're trying to figure out if this guy is as mobbed up as the people that have gone to jail for him, his banker and then the star witness. And when some guy comes up talking in a way that makes Judge Merchan clear the courthouse to talk about decorum.
And to Donnie's point about Michael Cohen, after Michael Cohen has kept his cool through 4 days,
It adds a credibility to Michael because you go,
Correct.
I
this
totally
is.
agree.
Yeah.
And what's interesting, you put this together with Trump closing his eyes, and if I'm a juror, I kind of go, this side doesn't take it seriously. This side thinks they're above it. This side thinks they don't have to be here. Nobody wants, and kind of works on you a bit. I mean, it just that these are human beings, and I, as I said, have never been a trial attorney, but having sat through thousands of focus groups in my life, people are people, and they react a certain way.
Exactly. I don't know if this applies in a courtroom, but in politics, there's a curve, right? I mean, Cohen is there as the co-criminal. He's not. I mean, the Pope was busy. The Pope couldn't testify in Donald Trump's criminal trial. He was on CBS last night. I mean, you lots of. And again, I only know what I know from mob movies and David Kelly and you. But it seems that there has to be at least one example in time where someone who had lied before and maybe even gone to jail was viewed as credible by a jury.
Well, I've told this story about when I have put Sammy Gravana, the underboss of the Gambino family, on the stand, and he cooperated, and he obviously had a lot more baggage than Michael Cohen. I mean,
Only 19 murders. That was it, right?
Well, there's that little thing. But one of the things that was part of his baggage was as he was on tape counseling members of the Gambino family about what happens if you get called into the grand jury. And he had various percentages. He says, I can't remember the exact amount, but it was like 65% of the time you can actually just tell the truth. And then he says, but another 25% or so, he says, you sort of bob and weave. Like you sort of like, what do you mean? And ask and try to avoid the question. And then he said, the rest, just lie. And I remember Summation just saying the only thing that is surprising about that tape recording is that it doesn't say 100% of the time lie.
Exactly. I mean, and listen, I actually, I mean, Vaughn, I want to give you the last word. I want to ask you a two-part question. One, bring me up to speed if this is still ongoing. But two, it is possible that the jury found Michael Cohen engaging and rather tolerant. I mean, the most generous descriptions in conservative media of Todd Blanche's time was uneven. Todd Blanche apologized to the jury for, quote, jumping around a lot. So again, in right-wing media, in Todd Blanche's own words, it veered between uneven and jumping around a lot. We have no idea. The jury may have found Michael Cohen a guy who has paid a price and feels some remorse. I mean, they may have found him alarmingly credible. We have no idea. We know nothing. You might know something. Vaughn.
Right. And the question was there going to be another potential witness that comes forward that wasn't somebody like Robert Costello, who is a friend of Rudy Giuliani, who Michael Cohen, I mean, we're talking about the witness on the stand right now is the same witness who Michael Cohen has already told the jury acted in a covert, I spy-ish type of a way when he was sending him emails, again, emails that have already been entered into as evidence, in which he said, I'm going to be talking with my friend, Rudy Giuliani, who is meeting for dinner with his client, Donald Trump. Let me know if there's anything that I should be conveying to them and passing along. That came just mere weeks before he flipped. And so I think for this jury here, they have heard from somebody who doubled down here today. Susan Hoffinger said, do you have any doubt that you had a conversation with Trump to work it out? Cohen, no doubt. Do you have any doubt in your mind that Mr. Trump gave you the final sign-off? Cohen, no doubt. Again, so if Robert Costello is the defense's one key witness that they bring forward, if you're the jury, you can call into question the extent to which you would put Robert Costello's story up against Michael Cohen. And of course, the main man, the defendant himself, who will sit there and would have the opportunity to go and defend himself and testify. And right now, there is no indication that he's going to do that on his own behalf.
For Trump, the only case where it now matters that he is a criminal defendant is in New York, where Trump's trial reached its inflection point today, as DA Bragg's team has just told the judge today that the DA's office has proven its case based on the evidence, and thus intoning the well-known phrase, quote, "Your Honor, the people rest." That's today, in the only case that looks to be going to trial by the election. That means the prosecutors literally rest their case and take the position they've supplied enough evidence to prove each and every element of this crime, which they say Donald Trump committed, this felony, beyond a reasonable doubt. And that does something today. It hands control of the case, meaning the witnesses and requests to put in evidence and all of those things, back to the court, which can hear the defense's case unless the defense were to decline to mount one. And I could tell you tonight, we already know they are mounting one. So we are legally in the uncharted territory here. I told you about those other cases. They matter in various ways, and Donald Trump could clearly lose the election and go on to face trial in those cases. But in this unusual time, in this chapter of history that we're living through, the defense is now up after the prosecution has rested its case in the only case defendant Donald Trump faces by November. So we're approaching jury deliberation could start as soon as next week, and I could get into what we're counting with you. But prosecutors have finished their case now. And they ended basically with key witness Michael Cohen, who spent a record 4 days on the stand, including today's cross-examination by Trump's team.
The prosecution is quickly wrapping up its case in the first criminal trial of a former American president.
It could be the home stretch in Lower Manhattan. Michael Cohen back on the stand.
The defense wrapped up with Michael Cohen after 3 days of cross-examination.
It was a grueling 3 days. The prosecution started its redirect by focusing on the Stormy Daniels payments.
The prosecution has now rested its case. The defense has also just now called its first witness.
There's always this outstanding question of whether the former president will testify or not.
Judge Juan Merchan saying this morning that closing arguments will now happen after Memorial Day.
Cohen's time on the stand has proven pivotal. And it's clear both sides see it that way. They see him as pivotal and important. The Trump defense team's first witness was brought up to the stand today primarily to attack Michael Cohen further, which I'll get to in a moment. But Cohen's cross-examination continued to raise doubts about whether or not he's a credible witness. There were admissions that he stole, at least at one point, from the Trump organization. There's the way he's had to stress or admit that he has some kind of financial interest in this case, and being under oath, he confirmed, yes, he does, while also trying to show that a Trump conviction itself would not necessarily alter his current role or media activities as a commentator. Cohen arguing a hypothetical Trump acquittal would actually give him more to talk about in his various podcasts, media interviews, which, as we've mentioned, include on this and other news channels. If the questioning of Michael Cohen began with some big topics and clashes, I got to tell you, it wrapped up with a series of smaller lines of inquiry. And we just don't know if this will ultimately confuse the jury or just downright bore them. But you can think about it like this. Did Cohen recently lie about the core facts of this case? Big question. Did he possibly misremember which phone call was about a given topic? That's a small question, possibly pointless. And there have been skirmishes about his calls from 8 years ago. Prosecutors tried to get back to the focus and the bottom line, asking, for example, was he too busy in October 16 to get Trump's approval on the Daniels payment? And Cohen was able to confirm no. So the point there is that of all the different things that have happened, this payment to Stormy Daniels mattered at the time, and Cohen had enough wherewithal in the position to recall what happened as something that mattered a lot, even if other calls or points might be in dispute. Now, Trump's defense team also had made some progress raising doubts about whether Cohen was truthful about recent testimony within the recent recollections he had, including about this call that he says proves up the case because he confirmed with Trump on the phone at a certain call that he'd made the payment. So prosecutors returned to that topic today. They got a picture into evidence showing Donald Trump with the very same bodyguard that Cohen identified on that call, which appears to back up Cohen's version of events, that he could have called that bodyguard about one topic and then also quickly talked to Trump by phone about the hush money. And this is the date in question, and there is the bodyguard who was called. So this is an example of why we've said you have to take it all over time. It's why the jury has been told by the judge not to try to draw conclusions a day at a time. And if you're watching us at home on the news, you can draw conclusions, but that's your choice as a citizen watching. The jury has been told, even if one day ends with a lot of kind of suspicious sounding questions about, well, did Michael Cohen lie about that? Did he fake that? Did he not really talk to Trump about that call? The jury's been told, you're hearing the attack, you'll hear the response, and don't form a conclusion until you start to deliberate. So what looked like perhaps a more questionable thing under questioning last week, and Cohen didn't, to be clear, have the best answers on it, now has this extra evidence, this photograph, and a little more pushback on the idea of, yes, maybe what Cohen said is true. Maybe he made a call, even if there was this other thing about this harassment and prankster, and that's what he was texting the bodyguard about. But maybe he also then said, hey, hand the phone over to the boss. I got something for him. Hey, I made the payment. You could imagine neither of them wanted to spend that much time on the phone talking about it. And he said, I made the thing. Okay, done. Now, inside the courtroom, observers saw Cohen, near the end here, look at Trump, who did not look back, and then the DA rested the case. Now, the Trump defense began its case today. So after 19 days and 20 different witnesses, now the Trump team gets to show the jury what it's focused on, what it thinks the story is. I've told you before, they're not under a legal burden to provide a defense, and sometimes you have cases where the defense doesn't do anything, doesn't call any witnesses. Here, they are exercising that right. And again, it's not like they have to match. It's not like, oh, the other side got 20 witnesses, we have our own 20. You'd expect more prosecution witnesses because they have the burden of proof. The defense is just bringing on who they think can add the context or the story they want to tell. Now, covering a case fairly means looking at both sides, and this is the Trump side. But covering a case fairly doesn't mean pretending both sides are always equal. And I can just tell you, it was not a very strong start today for the defense. Trump's lawyers called a paralegal to discuss calls that were in evidence, and then they called a lawyer linked to Michael Cohen, who Giuliani and Trump have tried to use to discredit Michael Cohen. His name's Robert Costello. You may have heard of him. He was also called before the grand jury. Now, today, this lawyer, Costello, testified that Michael Cohen had told him Trump didn't know about the payments back when they first discussed this. In other words, the Trump defense then and now. But there are many problems with Costello as a witness. He's publicly attacked Cohen. He's been a quite obvious representative of Trump's interests. He's used his role in all of this to discard whatever privileges might have attached between him, a lawyer, talking to then Michael Cohen. Their client relationship was never all that clear, but he's gone out of his way to sort of show where he stands, and that's not all. Today, as a witness, Costello was rebuked by this judge for antics on the stand, including interruptions and apparently sort of out-of-pocket, arrogant behavior, which actually at one point led the judge to clear the courtroom. Now, this is unusual. It is a bad start for the major Trump defense witness on the first day that they're calling witnesses. The judge had to respond to Costello acting out because he was saying geez and sort of muttering on the side, and the judge said, quote, if you don't like my ruling, you don't say geez, you don't give me side eye, and you don't roll your eyes. Do you understand that? Costello said he understood. Judge Merchan then clearing the jury from the room to admonish Costello so that he wouldn't prejudice the jury further while also taking control of the courtroom. The judge also was heard saying to Costello, are you staring me down right now? This is the most heated moment we've seen in this high-stakes trial. Certainly the judge deciding there was a line that had been crossed by this Trump side witness. And it speaks to the way this defense witness was composing himself. He drew some tough headlines here on the first day of Trump defense's team getting control. Now, it's a heated exchange that could also affect whether the jury views Costello as credible, that and combined with whatever else he says and how he acts. The jury will be weighing whether they believe his version of events in the context of all of this, including how he comes across in court. So, what do we have? Well, Michael Cohen is the central figure here. Note that when all is said and done, all the strategy and all the second guessing, Michael Cohen was the DA's final witness. And probably the witness who spent the longest time on the stand, best we can count at this point in the trial. And now Michael Cohen is the focus of this testimony by one of the defense's first witnesses. So what do we take from that? If they could prove this case without Michael Cohen, the DA, they probably wouldn't have called him at all. They didn't bring up Karen McDougal. She was the other person who was a party to one of these hush money payments. There are people at the National Enquirer they didn't bring up because they had the top guy. They didn't think having the deputy or the other writer at the Enquirer mattered when you have the guy at the top who was in the room with Trump. There are all sorts of places where they said they had enough. With the underlying transaction and Michael Cohen's knowledge of what he says was Donald Trump's intent at the time, which was clearly stated, clear campaign crime according to Cohen, they needed Cohen to prove that case. And here what we see is the defense is worried about that. It's not enough that they cross-examined Cohen and felt like they scored enough blows. They brought up Mr. Costello, who is, and I think it's fairly proven, a weaker witness than Mr. Cohen, whatever his problems are that I've told you about. But they brought up an even weaker witness here who caused more antics today. Why? Because the defense is still worried that they're going to believe Michael Cohen. And even if they think some negative things about him, like he's a crook, or he's a tax cheat, or he's a sometime liar, each of the things I just said, he's admitted to. Even if they think those things, they might still believe him on the core question of what happened in 2016 and is he telling the truth about it now? And that is why Mr. Costello, warts and all, antics and all, admonishments and all, was hauled into court today to say in one more way, don't believe what Michael Cohen says Donald Trump did in that sordid election scandal of 2016.
Joining us now is Danya Perry. She is counsel for Michael Cohen in Trump's New York trial, and this is her first interview following Cohen's testimony. Danya, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you've spent the whole day in court, so I appreciate it. I just wanted to start by asking you, how is Michael Cohen feeling about his testimony now that his portion is wrapped?
Would you believe I haven't spoken with him since we walked out of that courtroom, and I'm going to try not to, and I'm certainly advising him to stay off of media and social media. I can tell you how I feel, which is not just relieved and exhausted, but good. I think it was a great day for the prosecution, and I think the sum total of the testimony, which was over 25 hours, I think, in the aggregate, I think it all went well, and as you point out, is just of a kind, of a piece with the rest of the testimony in this case. So to take your language, you know, there's an old saw, if the facts are not on your side, pound the law. If the law is not on your side, pound the facts. If neither are on your side, pound the table. And I think we saw a lot of that from the defense over the course of the past week and change.
There was a fair amount of table pounding, including near the end of today, this afternoon, in this exchange between Robert Costello and Judge Merchan. What did you make of that? We know what their objective was, but what did you make of that and kind of the impact on the case?
Well, we had hightailed out of the courtroom and the courthouse by then, but from all accounts, look, this is also very much in line with what Michael has testified to and the reason why he did not trust Bob Costello. And so, as Judge Merchan apparently said at sidebar, the behavior bordered on contemptuous, legal term, and I think not overly surprising given what we've heard from the witness stand.
I mean, his objective, of course, was to add to the effort to discredit your client, Michael Cohen. Years ago, he waived his attorney-client privilege when it comes to Robert Costello. Do you regret that? Should he regret that?
I don't think there were any blows that landed. I think Michael testified exactly what that relationship was and why he stayed at arm's length from Bob Costello. And I think the jury saw that on full display today. So no, I think Michael has been nothing but forthright with this prosecution team. Some of the, so-called aha or gotcha moments were given to the defense care of Michael Cohen. He is the one who first disclosed this Redfinch payment that you referenced in your opening. He disclosed that 4 years ago in his book. So there was no gotcha moment. He is the one who turned over his phone voluntarily to the DA's office, and that is where the defense got those, so-called, Clarence Darrow moment, text messages between Michael Cohen and Keith Schiller. So all of this has been again, part and parcel of Michael Cohen providing information, trying to be cooperative, meeting with the DA's office dozens of times as he testified to. And so I think all of this is very much in keeping with, the top line. And the takeaway here is that he has made his peace with his admittedly checkered past and has decided to turn his loyalties away from Mr. Trump and towards his family, his country, and to be cooperative and to be truthful as of the time he made that decision. And he was also truthful about the many lies and mistakes he's made along the way.
To your point, he kind of volunteered, even during testimony, he wasn't pushed terribly hard on some of the specifics, including the $30,000. You're a criminal defense lawyer. I want to ask you about some of their strategies here, because they never cross-examined Cohen about a lot of parts of his earlier testimony, including the crucial Trump Tower meeting, as well as his visit to the White House. Why do you think they skipped over all those topics?
Well, I want to first say hats off to the prosecution here. I thought Susan Hoffinger did a masterful job doing what we call drawing the sting and front-loading a lot of that damaging information. And so I think there were moments where Todd Blanche was a very old friend of mine. And so I'm not going to say much other than he probably felt there was only damage he could do by going back to it and revisiting it. And so I think there was that. And I think that they really didn't want to touch a lot of the substance. A lot of the cross-examination related to collateral matters that really had nothing to do with the core facts of this case and the core testimony from Mr. Cohen. And so it's, I think, what you described as distraction, noise. It's a sideshow, it's smoke and mirrors. It's what defense lawyers sometimes do, and I don't fault them for doing it. But they really didn't want to go too close to the actual facts and the testimony here, because as you pointed out, I don't know if it's 20 witnesses, I don't know how many witnesses corroborated, but it's any which way, both by documentary and testimonial evidence. And I think it was probably a smart move to stay away from a lot of that.
They did stay away from a lot. One of the things they focused a great deal of time on was this single phone call from October 24th of 2016, when they claim your client misremembered. And Michael Cohen testified that he spoke to Trump about Daniels, but the defense says that's a lie. Kind of feels to me like a small detail in a much larger fact pattern here. But do you think it was a strategic decision by the defense to kind of amplify this one phone call to try to make it into something bigger than it really is? Or why so much focus there?
Yeah, again, I don't fault them for that. It seemed like something that where they could elicit, some inconsistencies or draw that out. And in fact, again, not a Perry Mason moment. This was a minute and 36 second conversation. The jury heard the recorded conversation about Karen McDougal, where the substantive portion was, a minute. And so a lot was accomplished, and several other topics of conversation were also discussed in that one short recording. And so, of course, the jury is going to be able to look at that and say, yeah, a lot can happen in 96 seconds. I mean, the prosecution could, it's kind of an old trick. They could just make the jury sit there silent for 96 seconds, and they'll see just how long that is. So I didn't think that was a great moment in a substantive way, but it's certainly, there's something to be said for courtroom theatrics and acting like you scored some big points. And look, the way some of the press reacted, people thought so just because there was that kind of performative energy. So again, I thought Todd Blanche did the best job that he could with what he had. And there was some baggage. There's no question. Whenever you have someone who's pled guilty as many times as he has, and who's admitted it as many times as he has, you're going to have some moments. But all in all, I didn't think that October 24th call really was anything other than noise and a sideshow.
You kind of alluded to this in the baggage, and Michael Cohen has voluntarily put some things forward, some things he has been pushed on. I guess the big question here is, should the outcome of this case rest on Michael Cohen's credibility?
That's not for me to say, of course, and certainly not during the pendency of this trial. There's a very attentive, very smart jury. I've watched them keenly. They are paying very close attention, and they are not missing a beat here. So ultimately, of course, this will be in their hands as soon as next week, and they will decide.
Tanya Perry, I know you've had a long day. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jen.
But we begin tonight with these 5 words from the prosecution in Donald Trump's hush money election interference trial. Your Honor, the people rest. After 15 days and 21 witnesses, the prosecution handed over the reins to the defense, who began making their case this afternoon, beginning with testimony from Robert Costello, a criminal lawyer with ties to Rudy Giuliani. Costello was in talks to represent Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, in 2018, as Cohen faced federal indictment for taking out the very HELOC loan at issue in this case, the one he used to pay off Stormy Daniels for the benefit of the Trump presidential campaign, which the Trump campaign then lied about in their business records. Within 15 minutes of being on the stand, Judge Juan Marchand lost his patience with Costello's repeated audible and visible reactions to the objections to Costello's testimony. And the judge then cleared the courtroom to admonish the witness. If you don't like my ruling, you don't say geez, Marchand said, adding that Costello can't strike anything because the judge is the only person who can strike something. You don't give me side eye and you don't roll your eyes, Marchand said. Costello said he understood, and we'll get to more on the defense's case a little bit later. But first, Michael Cohen wrapped up his 4th day on the witness stand today and his 3rd under cross-examination, which at times was meandering and kind of hard to follow, as Trump's defense attorney, Todd Blanche, focused primarily on Cohen's character, trying to paint him as a liar, a cheat, someone who could not be trusted, who was just out for revenge and to financially benefit himself. As Blanche wrapped his cross-examination, he tried to land a final blow in front of the jury, asking Cohen, "Do you have a financial interest in the outcome of this case?" Cohen responded, "Yes, sir." Blanche then asks, the question of today is whether a conviction benefits you financially, to which prosecutor Susan Hoffinger said, "Asked and answered, Your Honor." Judge Marchand said, "I will allow it. You can answer it." And perhaps to Blanche's surprise was Cohen's response. The answer is no. Blanche asked, "It doesn't?" Cohen added, "It's better if he is not for me, because it gives me more to talk about in the future." Blanche spent much of the day air punching, trying to throw multiple theories against the wall with hopes that one will stick for at least one juror, including that Cohen was too consumed with his own business dealings during October 2016, when the Stormy Daniels payment was made, such that his recollections about his calls and dealings with Trump are especially suspect. There was the theory that Trump's payments to Cohen were just part of a retainer agreement as Trump's lawyer. And there was the claim that non-disclosure agreements like the one Stormy Daniels signed are very common and not illegal. During redirect, prosecutor Susan Hoffinger knocked each of these bowling pins down one by one. Hoffinger, were you too busy in October 2016 to finalize the Stormy Daniels payoff with Mr. Trump? Cohen, no, ma'am. Hoffinger, was the $420,000 payment that you were owed as reimbursement, did that have anything to do with the retainer agreement? Cohen, no, ma'am. On the NDAs, Hoffinger, under the circumstances of this NDA with Stormy Daniels that you testified to, was it perfectly legal under those circumstances? Cohen, no, ma'am. She then made sure to clarify for the jurors. Hoffinger, are you actually on trial here in this case? Cohen, no, ma'am. Hoffinger, are you a witness here? Cohen, yes. And again, it needs to be repeated that despite being the one whose prosecution and congressional testimony gave birth to this case, Michael Cohen is essentially battling cleanup in this case against individual one, meaning the case against Donald Trump doesn't rest on the testimony just of Michael Cohen. Nearly everything Cohen has testified to has already been corroborated by evidence entered into the record by other witnesses, documents, emails, text messages, and audio recordings. It's likely that we'll hear a lot about that evidence again by the prosecution next Tuesday, the day after Memorial Day, when Judge Marchand is scheduled closing arguments to begin. Closing arguments could have started later this week, but Marchand ruled this morning that due to the upcoming holiday weekend, he does not want there to be such a large gap between those closing arguments, jury instructions, and the start of deliberations. Joining me now is Lisa Rubin, MSNBC legal correspondent. Duncan Levin, criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor for the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, and Lachlan Cartwright, former executive editor for the National Enquirer. He's currently a special correspondent for The Hollywood Reporter. Thank you all for being here. Lisa, let me start with you. Characterize what happened in court today for us beyond what I have said just now.
We've given a really good summary, Joy, but I think what happened today can best be characterized as exhaustion and exasperation, because Michael Cohen was on cross-examination for the third consecutive day. And at times, not only did Todd Blanche's cross-examination seem meandering, but it was really repetitive. There were lots of subject matters that were covered again and again. That having been said, there were a couple of surprises and not ones that were favorable to the defense. So I think the other theme of today is that whatever advantage the defense was enjoying on Thursday afternoon when they closed, that dissipated for them today through two different circumstances. One is that their remaining cross-examination of Michael Cohen really didn't land any punches, and in fact, Cohen got to punch back. And the second is that Robert Costello, who is that other witness that they called today, who was sort of trying to function as Michael Cohen's lawyer despite not having ever been hired by Michael Cohen, he himself was a little bit of a disaster on the stand, as you recognized. And the jury, while they didn't see necessarily Judge Merchan chastise Robert Costello, they saw all the audible and visible reactions that Costello had to being stymied in answering questions that the judge didn't want answered. And repeatedly, Costello tried to talk over the sustained objections or said things like, geez, or rolled his eyes and things like that. I've really never seen a witness behave like that in court. And on demeanor alone, Robert Costello gets a big fat F.
Lachlan, I want to go to you on this because, you know, there was a lot of talk leading up to Michael Cohen all over TV of people saying, oh, he's going to be a disaster. This is going to be horrible for the prosecution. He's got this record of criminality as if he was like a bank robber before Donald Trump made him do crimes for him. You know, I mean, the guy's a lawyer. And I said repeatedly on this show, number one, he's an attorney. So he knows how to act in court. He's been in front of a trial jury before, in front of a judge before. Number two, he's a practiced television guest and host. He hosts a freaking podcast. So I assumed he was going to be a solid witness. Make of it what you will. Michael Cohen's ability to just answer the questions, yes, sir, no, sir, be succinct, get it done. And this guy Costello, who seems to be the witness that a lot of people thought Michael Cohen was going to be.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, Joy, when you juxtapose the two of them. Michael Cohen, cool, calm, collected, under pressure over the last 4 days that he has been on the stand. The defense have been continually trying to niggle at him and trying to get a reaction. And he has been, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. He has been incredibly steady in the witness stand. And then we have Bob Costello come on this afternoon. And within the first 15 minutes, the judge has to ask the jury to leave to admonish him for his behavior on the stand. And if I'm the jury looking at the first real defense witness being Bob Costello and how he behaved this afternoon compared to Michael Cohen, that would not have left a good impression on me.
Duncan, welcome to the show. How unusual is it for a witness and a judge to get into it the way that, you know, we're just reading the accounts of it. I'm sure it was quite dramatic in person. How unusual is that? And in this courtroom, how damaging could that be for the defense case?
Well, they've clearly gotten off to a terrible start here. It's very unusual to be slapped down in this way, but this type of behavior by a witness is one that the defense clearly should have gotten under control far before they ever called him to the stand. You remember Todd Blanche got off on the wrong foot with the cross-examination of Michael Cohen, too, having his first question to Michael Cohen be objected to and the objection sustained right off the bat, because he was asking personal questions about, didn't you call me this and didn't you call me that? The judge is clearly exhausted and exasperated with this defense at this point in the trial. And so it's just they're off to a bad start. This is a witness who probably did not need to be called. They're calling him to basically try to destroy Michael Cohen, but they could try to destroy Michael Cohen just in their closing argument. They don't need to call Robert Costello. Robert Costello is a witness who Michael Cohen already testified on direct examination that he lied to because Robert Costello was going to talk to Trump about whatever Cohen said. So he's a witness that they really didn't need to call. And to get off on this footing, particularly on their first and maybe their only witness, is just a misstep by the defense that was an unforced error.
An unforced error probably because Trump wanted them to do it, Lisa. I mean, it seems like the defense... Yeah. That seems to be the characterization every day, is that they're waging a defense that probably if they had a more normal client, they wouldn't, right? They're just doing whatever Trump wants and attacking the people he doesn't like and sort of trying to belittle them on the stand.
What was your biggest takeaway?
I think Cohen testified today that in a 2018 letter to the FEC, he said he did not think the Stormy Daniels payment amounted to campaign contributions or campaign expenses. And today on the stand, he walked that back and said, actually, in 2018, I knew full well that they were campaign contributions. And to me, that was really important because Michael Cohen has now made two links to Trump. He has said that Trump knew about the falsification in his prior testimony, and today he linked him to the campaign contributions violation. And that's the first time he has done that, and that is the only time that has come out. And despite what you think about Michael Cohen's credibility, when you take those two things together, I thought that was a really important moment.
Huge, important moment for Hugo, who covers this day in and day out and remembers all of those facts. But I just kept thinking about that jury today, right? Laura Jarrett was reporting that those jurors, some of them were rubbing their eyes, appearing restless. How hard is it for them, right? This point that Hugo brings up, that's this hugely important point, are they even getting it? Amass the amount of just details and information and bickering and objecting that's happening in that courtroom.
You know, I feel a little bit like a broken record. I think many people, including myself, have said repeatedly there's diminishing returns if you keep on going at something that doesn't need that continued attention. And at some point, after you've made your point, you lose your jury. And you don't want to lose your jury. And on top of that, if you become combative and aggressive and you have issues with the judge and the court, that just makes matters worse. And there was one point in this, pardon me, not in the summation, but in the cross-examination, Blanche was asking a question about, about lying in the past, and then ultimately asked a question that sort of sank his entire cross-examination. You just got to let it go and move on. And that's the problem. They didn't do that. They were not efficient. They didn't hit their points and go to the next one.
They being Blanche, the defense.
They being Blanche, absolutely.
Barb, the judge is trying to make this whole process as clean and fair as possible. He made the decision today that closing arguments would be after the long weekend, next Tuesday. What's your take, thinking about the jury, their fatigue, their ability to get influenced over a long weekend, or facts in their minds start to fade away over time?
Yes. So I think what the judge is trying to do is to make sure that the jury hears both closing arguments in close proximity to each other. So what he wants to avoid is having, for example, the prosecution close on Thursday. We have a day off Friday as well as Monday. And then it's not until next Tuesday that they hear the defense case. And then they begin deliberating 4 days after they heard the prosecution case, when they may have forgotten some of those details. And so I think that despite the fact that it might be less efficient than it could otherwise be, it might add an extra day at the back end. The thought is, let's put these two closing arguments together so that the jury is able to assess them both kind of all at the same time. And I think that's a good move. I also think it's a good move to get this long holiday weekend behind us so that the jury isn't trying to race to finish up in time for the long weekend. Sometimes you see that jury verdicts often come back on Fridays because they don't want to come back after the weekend. And so I think by saying at the outset, look, we're going to take the weekend off and then we're all coming back, the judge has made it clear what the game plan is going forward to be fair to both sides.
Hugo, I want to talk about language that we heard today, language around Trump's businesses, right? Like phrases like friends in high places, we're going to stay strong, or who's going down, right? Ideas that someone's going to get grossed up, meaning the lawyer will be paid more, or a salaried employee possibly getting a retainer, the idea not to use email or text messages or sending checks to a bodyguard, okay? None of the things I just laid out are how good, honest businesses operate. Yet Donald Trump ran in 2016 and 2020 and still today claims to be the CEO president of a business that's clearly not being run on the up and up.
The language evokes a mafia kind of organization. And I don't think you can get away from that. And this has been the kind of theme that has pervaded all the way through this trial, is all of these guys involved in the various transactions and the hush money and the repayment. You know, even today, Bob Costello, the witness that the defense put on and was supposed to support Trump's case, came across as a guy who was trying to cover it all up, and he was the kind of the cleanup job. And when you think about it like that, it kind of suggests that Trump had all of these guys around him to clean up what he knew was wrongdoing. And if that's the idea that the jury takes away to deliberation, then you've already done 50% of the job for the prosecution, because the prosecution only needs to show that there was a cover-up.
But like a mob boss, didn't sign his name and surrounded himself with hitmen.
I would take that theme even further. And as the prosecution, you're going to go and say, you know, you don't like Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen's a bad actor. Michael Cohen has done some bad things. But who are you going to get to point to the worst guy? And I use this expression, or not used this term before. He's the Henry Hill. He's the Sammy the Bull. He's the one who's getting the main bad guy and going with that mob thing. You know, whether this is a new Teflon Don, we'll find out soon enough. But that's what you want to do. You don't want him to date your daughter. You don't want him to marry your sister. You don't want him to be your brother. But that's not what we're here about. We're here about him telling what happened and telling it truthfully today, knowing full well when he stepped in that courtroom, he was going to be ridiculed, torn down, and ripped apart. But he still came and he still told you the truth.
Barb, do you think the prosecution made their case?
Yeah, you know, of course, the relevant decision maker here is the jury, who have been in court every single day, listening to every word of testimony and reviewing every exhibit, and then will deliberate together. So it's difficult to predict what a jury will do. But if you look at what their task was, proving that Donald Trump caused the falsification of business records for the purpose of concealing other crimes, that is, campaign finance violations, then yeah, the evidence is all there. The pieces are all there. They brought in evidence well beyond the testimony of Michael Cohen, who, you know, my guess is a jury will even say, we don't want, let's look at this whole case even without Michael Cohen and see if it makes sense. And I think they've got the case there even without Michael Cohen. They have got the financial records. They have got David Pecker explaining what the whole conspiracy was all about, being the eyes and ears. They've got Hope Hicks involved. So I think that the case has been made. The question will be whether the jury sees it that way and whether the government, in their view, has met its burden beyond a reasonable doubt unanimously.